Rather than following the recommendations of the state in lockstep, they instead opted to use a more common sense approach. Athletes are required to mask up at all times while in the building, on the court side or mat side, but not during strenuous activity. The World Health Organization does not recommend and has not changed its stance on the issue of wearing face masks during strenuous workout or during competition. It can cause restriction of airflow and complications, especially in those with diagnosed or more concerning undiagnosed pulmonary or cardiac issues. There is also the issue of sweat and moisture droplets accumulating in the fabric and creating a problem with mildew and fungus.
Correct.
This information can be accessed for verification purposes at multiple places on their website, including, and he listed a website that I will supply at a later date. I am asking the board to follow our neighboring communities and take a better look at what we are imposing upon our athletes. Blind compliance with this illogical recommendation places an unnecessary hardship on what is already difficult. Our young ladies and gentlemen who represent our school athletically work extremely hard to do so. We should not be making things more difficult. If you do not believe that wearing a face mask covering during strenuous physical activity causes both physical and or mental hardship, I would invite you to try it. I am sure you would be welcomed at a basketball or wrestling practice to test that belief. My request is that you, as your school board, not issue a broad ruling of required or not required regarding masks during training, performance, and competition, but instead allow our students and their parents to choose what is right for them. I appreciate your time. Regards, Donald Ice. Those are the two that I had.
Mr. Pushkar, did those other people get on?
I have just admitted Mr. Sekrechek and a Galaxy S10 that I tried to get to identify itself earlier. Where I hope that they can successfully talk.
Mr. Sekrechek.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Southmoreland Education Association. The Southmoreland Education Association represents 132 of the district's employees, which includes every teacher, guidance counselor, speech pathologist, and school nurse at Southmoreland. Just as we were doing before the pandemic, but now without a contract, the Southmoreland Education Association members have continued to consistently and conscientiously fulfill our duties and responsibilities in an ever-changing academic landscape. We have followed directives and provided instruction with fidelity to match the novel requirements and expectations at every educational level. Teachers across the district have been given various instructions from their supervisors. These directives have largely been inconsistent across grade levels and consequently have led to a great deal of confusion amongst the staff and community. For the board to be openly critical of staff during the meeting without recognizing that teachers are merely doing what they have been directed to do is disheartening. On behalf of our dedicated staff, a team that has worked tirelessly since March to modify our delivery of instruction and meet the unique needs of hundreds of families, the Southmoreland Education Association must address the lack of professional conduct displayed at last month's school board meeting. At the December 2020 reorganization board meeting, much discussion resulted in derogatory and speculative comments specifically about our secondary teachers. Although specific teachers were not named, it was implied that staff, in particular at our high school, were failing students and judgments were being made regarding educational philosophy and instructional strategies. The Southmoreland Education Association is calling for board members to use caution in their comments. Most board members and school employees have thick skin and are accustomed to dealing with community criticism from those who disagree with difficult decisions, such as closing school buildings, disbanding sports teams, or reorganizing staff. But in the age of social media, attacks can raise questions about whether or how district officials should respond. Legal issues such as libel may be involved. While criticism is nothing new, controversies can take on a life of their own as local bloggers express opinions and individual comments on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and other social media sites. Historically, issues have played out mostly during the public input segment of board meetings or in articles written by a reporter for a local newspaper. People appeared in person to voice their concerns and were quoted by name. Today, critics can be anonymous. This permits individuals to escape consequences for spreading misinformation, making personal attacks, and sometimes telling bold-faced lies. We are asking that the board give consideration to whether the audience is a small circle of like-minded individuals who are not interested in the school's version of events or even what is best for our students. Students succeed when communities come together. We have seen an impressive groundswell of community involvement and engagement around the future success of the Southmoreland School District during this pandemic. It's disappointing to see the Board of Education operating in a manner that further damages the population of teachers and students. Students and teachers of Southmoreland deserve better. We expect more of our elected leaders and those they appoint. The SEA is concerned this pattern of behavior may have repercussions that will negatively affect every student and professional staff. In conclusion, the Southmoreland Education Association is calling for the board to focus on the student achievement and a plan to return to in-person instruction when, and only when, we have the safest possible learning environment for students and staff following all mitigation guidelines. I thank you for your time.
Ooh. Yeah, guidelines. Ooh.
Do we have someone else on, Mr. Pushkar?
Again, we've admitted somebody. I've asked them to identify themselves. The show only is Galaxy S10. I'm going to ask them to start. If they're watching and you're on, please join in the conversation.
I think we just lost them.
They're there.
No one else waiting? Because I have someone.
There we go. Okay, I'm sorry.
Now let's see, S10 plus.
Nicola Rear.
Nicole, go ahead and speak.
She says she has no sound.
Does she want to try to get off and get back on?
I'm afraid there's nothing I can do to help her. It's on her end.
She said she's going to try that to get off and get back on.
Okay, thank you. While we're waiting for her to get back on, I just wanted to say something. In all of the decisions that have been made by this board, I myself, and I don't believe anybody else, has been approached from anybody from the teachers union requesting us not to have school open. These decisions have not come from teachers not wanting to do their jobs. They are doing their jobs from home. They are doing their jobs from buildings. I just wanted to point that out. This was never a teacher's decision to not come to school. I have made comments myself that part of my reason for wanting to keep schools remote is to protect teachers. But that is not because a teacher reached out to me and said, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. I just wanted that to be public. This is not a case for teachers need to get back in the building and do their jobs. They've, at this point, not been requested to do that, and they are working remotely. That's all. Thank you. Mrs. O'Rear, are you able to hear us now?
Does she know to look at the top or bottom of her screen to unmute?
She's not muted because I would be able to see that. All right.
Okay.
Does she have another device that she could try?
I heard her briefly when she first got on the first time.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on now.
Would it be any different if she were just to call in instead of being on video? Would that make a difference at all? Maybe that's an option.
You could try that.
I don't know. I'm just trying to throw out some ideas. I don't know. I feel bad that she can't get through.
Suspend the rules and let her in if she calls in 10 minutes.
Able to hear us at all?
He's called in before, I think.
Can we get her a phone number to call?
I think she called in before. I'm not sure.
Russ,
Oh, is that what that is?
that's good.
We have a phone number for her to call in on.
I can see her again on there.
Yeah, you like rice and you like.
Is she, wait a minute,
Wait a
she's
minute,
connected.
it says
I think she
connected
found,
audio.
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Anybody, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Finally. Okay. All right. Here we go. I guess. I don't know. All right. Sorry. 1 second. My microphone is muted. Okay. Here we go. All right. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I've never done one of these like little meeting things. So do I just announce myself or introduce myself?
Yes, you can tell us who you are and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you. Well, hi everyone. My name is Nicole Rear. I have 2 students in Southmoreland High School. I have a senior and a 9th grader. I wanted to address the board tonight regarding some issues with this whole virtual learning. It's failing, 100% fail. I understand that you guys as a district and as administration have probably put a lot of work into this, but it's not working anymore. You know, you can't expect these kids to spend 7 hours on a computer all day long and expect them to be compliant. I mean, you gave them like, you know, self-reliance and self-responsibility, but then you demand compliance. I had a teacher email my 9th grader, telling her that how to dress accordingly, that she cannot be sitting in her room on her bed, that he wants to see her full face, instead of like she had it tilted upwards, so it was kind of up towards the ceiling. I'm sorry, but I did not give any teacher, any administration, any district permission to come into my house and dictate how my children can be in their own home. This is their safe space. That's not right. You cannot expect that. I had a teacher email my oldest, my senior, and tell her because she wasn't getting onto video chat, like this whole Zoom thing, she was only getting half credit for a full completed assignment. She got 50 out of 50 and she was only going to be able to get 25 out of 50 because she didn't attend a Zoom meeting. That's dictating. Okay, you want to dictate education to my kids, to Southmoreland's kids, put them back in school. That's where you can dictate. You cannot dictate in my home. This is just getting outrageous. Like, I mean, you got so many different platforms that you have to sign in on email. You have to follow some link for attendance, then fill out some form. Then you also have to follow some link inside each classroom. I mean, these kids have 6 to 8 classes on this like Google Classroom thing that they have to try to navigate, go back and forth between that and their email. I mean, that's frustrating enough. And then they have to be on this Zoom stuff. I'm sorry, why can't teachers do videos? That way each kid can learn at their own pace. Have y'all not thought about that, like, or discussed that? I don't understand it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Another thing, like here's one thing, the emails, for instance. I was in my daughter's emails and all night long, I was getting emails from teachers about what they're going to be doing the next day, starting at 11:56 p.m., 11:57 p.m., and 12:01 a.m. I'm sorry, why is that even happening? Like, I get it, that's probably what the teachers are doing and sending these emails out, and I guess she has to somehow navigate the notifications on her own phone or whatever she's using, but I think that's ridiculous. It literally woke me up because my phone was like dinging all night. Let's see, what else? I mean, I have a list of stuff. I don't even know if 5 minutes can cover this, but I guess a couple of my questions, I know you guys can't necessarily answer me, but like, to me, the elephant in the room, like these state recommendations as far as putting these kids back in school, if you all as a district don't follow these state recommendations, does your funding get cut? I'd personally like to know that, because I don't understand. If it's a recommendation, why do we need to follow it? Like,
That's right.
you know, I mean, I pay taxes, and I'm pretty sure the rest of Southmoreland School District parents pay taxes. Where's that money going? So do we need funding? Do we need our taxes? We need our kids back in school. I mean, the AB model was working. Why isn't that happening? I don't know. It blows my mind. I do not think it is right. I mean, if you guys are going to have to stick to this virtual thing, then whatever, but fix it. Ain't nobody learning. Kids are failing. Kids are depressed. I mean, like, you're going to have years upon years trying to rebuild this education system for these kids, because here we are sitting at home doing nothing. My kids don't want to do it anymore. I wouldn't want to do it. You know, you spend 7 hours a day on a computer watching a computer screen. And then only if your teacher allows you to do homework or classwork during that 7 hours, can you do it. But the majority of the teachers are not. I mean, I'm getting home at 6, 7 o'clock at night from my work, and my kids are still doing work, classwork. What? Like, what is this teaching them? How to sit still? This is a failure in education. And every kid in the Southmoreland School District has a right to a free education. I mean, I know you all follow this model of No Child Left Behind, and maybe this whole, like, now it's going into, you know, no child failing such and such of a grade. I mean, is that what we're going into? Because the majority of these kids are being left behind. So you can't use that motto anymore.
Mrs. O'Rear, I'm sorry, your 5 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Also, real quick, can I ask one more thing? This is just in regards to the parents of a fallen classmate. They are really, really hoping to be able to retire number 15 for Brandon Peterson. So I really hope that you all maybe talk about that tonight, because I think it really should happen. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Minutes of the following board meeting.
The board will be asked to consider the approval of the minutes of the virtual meetings from December 7th, 2020, the reorganization meeting, and the December 21st, 2020 special voting meeting.
Is there any discussion on that? General Fund Board summary reports for November 30th, 2020 and December 30th, 2020.
Board will be asked to consider the approval of the General Fund Board summary report as of November 30th, 2020 and December 30th, 2020.
Is there any discussion?
Michelle, is the reason we got a report dating way back to November, the fact that we didn't have any December board meetings? Is that why we got two of them now?
I believe at the beginning
That's correct.
December,
Okay.
Mr. Morneau may have been off.
Well, we didn't
I
have
think
any,
there was a meeting he wasn't present at.
we didn't have any meetings to give it to us, I don't think. Did we, Jim? I don't think.
That's correct.
Any other discussion? Fund accounting check summary, general fund from November and December 2020.
The board will be asked to consider the approval of the fund accounting check summary general fund for November and December 2020.
Is there any discussion?
I have a question. Jim, do we pay these cyber school charges? There's a lot of them by the month. Is that how you get billed pretty much monthly? Because I see there's a bunch of them on there.
Yes, generally speaking, they bill monthly. There's a few, maybe two that bill quarterly, but monthly is the usual methodology that they utilize.
Okay, so you'll have a reconciliation at the end of the year for the total amounts, is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Pushkar, can we make sure everyone is out of the meeting that spoke at the beginning?
Yeah, they've left the meeting.
Okay, thank you. October and November 2020 board treasurer reports on bank accounts.
The board will be asked to consider the approval of the October and November 2020 board treasury report.
Is there any discussion?
Once again, I don't quite understand it. Now, what this shows then is a beginning balance, the deposits, the checks that are paid out, and the ending bank balance. But then change in balance is the column that I don't understand. Is that the difference between the beginning bank balance and the ending bank balance, which is $3,090,000? Is that what that is, Jim?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
I show that as information.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other discussion? Superintendent information?
Okay, I am sure many people are aware that currently the Department of Ed came out with a new statement beginning with the start of the second semester. The department recommends public schools and counties with substantial transmission to consider returning elementary school students to some form of in-person instruction while secondary students remain fully remote, provided they follow all applicable orders and safety protocols. And that would be all masking procedures. And once again, we'd have to follow the 6-foot social distancing guidelines. So, that is out there for further discussion, moving forward. I'm also pleading with students and their parents. There are a lot of students that are struggling, and the reason why some of them are struggling is because they are not logging in or not becoming a part of the educational process that we, our teachers, are providing. So in an effort to address those individuals that are not actively participating in our instructional platform. We are going to be sending out and posting this letter that I would like to read to the board and to the community. And I would like to plead for those students to please become engaged in the educational process and log on. Dear Southmoreland community, as part of our school district commitment to our students and families, we wish to ensure that we are taking all measures to support our students' learning experiences and engagement with the teaching learning process during these unique times. In doing so, our district will be communicating with students and families through our engagement officers. For some families, our ability to connect has not been consistent. In other cases, we have had no responses to our request to provide students additional assistance. The engagement officers will be calling those families and also visiting to help remove barriers for students to connect with their teachers and to participate in their learning. In this way, we hope to assist those students as they work in the virtual setting by identifying those barriers to learning and addressing them. We want to thank you in advance for your continued commitment and support of our schools during these challenging times. And I would like to also just give you some indication of the measures that our staff are making to get some of these students engaged in the process. We have our attendance secretaries that are calling students on a regular basis, trying to get them to log on and become a part of the process. Our guidance counselors are reaching out to those students. Our administrators are reaching out to those students. The teachers themselves have been aggressively and actively reaching out to students to help them become engaged. We are sending letters to families. Our guidance counselors have attempted to establish truancy elimination plans with families. So we are making all efforts whatsoever. We're now even sending certified letters to families. So I am imploring those students, this is not,
50%.
I know these are challenging circumstances, but it's still educationally, it is your responsibility to be logging on. And we as a district really would like to provide you the greatest experience possible during these times. So please become engaged in your educational process.
Mash, where are you seeing that at? Is it pretty well spread throughout the district? Is it more heavy on the elementary side?
It's spread across the district, Mr. Carson. It might not be staggering numbers, but there are a lot of students that are disengaged, and because of that disengagement with the educational process, they are going to be struggling, and it is going to be challenging for them to move forward, to be able to make up that content. So, it's not too late right now. We still have half of a year left, the second semester. If we can get those students engaged, we're going to aggressively try to make a big difference in what they're learning, but we have to have them present. We have to have them engaged in a learning process.
Are you getting any feedback as to why they're not participating?
And many times the ones that we're reaching out to, they won't even respond to us. So that's why we're looking to send an engagement officer to try to, maybe there is some communication effort, maybe there's technology issues, but we would like to try to identify what those circumstances are and work with those individuals to get their child back and engaged in our schools.
Vince, I have a question. We had discussed earlier this year about the issue of compulsory school attendance. How is Southmoreland documenting excessive school absenteeism?
We take attendance every day, Dr. Fike. Our secretaries, we have guidance our attendance secretaries, which are the building level secretaries. They are taking attendance, and they are managing the attendance. And any building level principal, if you would like to add to that, but I do know that in the middle school, I'm present there, and I do see what efforts are being taken to have full accountability of who is present and who is not present.
Okay, well, Vince, maybe, I don't know what I'm talking about, but would there not be a correlation between absenteeism and the people to whom you're addressing this letter?
There is.
And what are the consequences of that?
We're attempting to work through as civil as possible by, engaging them in a truancy elimination plans. But to be totally honest with you, the next steps, we can make referrals to the local magistrate, for truancy issues. But, understanding that these are challenging times for everyone, we do not want to place undue hardships on families, but we also have the expectation that we are an educational institution and we want our students engaged.
Okay, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to implement the compulsory attendance consequences. Is that right?
We will.
You will.
We
Okay,
will.
I have a second question, and I know nobody wants to hear any kind of research, but they're saying that in Pennsylvania, up to 50% of all students are not logging on, those who are in virtual learning. Could you roughly say what percent of Southmoreland is not really adequately participating in virtual learning?
I would think it's less than that. Any of the building level principals have any information on their levels?
I couldn't say an exact number, Dr. Fike. That's a good question, but I would say maybe a quarter of our kids are not logging in consistently.
Okay, that's 25%, yeah.
And we are trying to reach them. Our counselors call them. We try to schedule meetings with them. We've sent some certified letters to ensure that they're even at those locations. Sometimes folks have to move and they don't notify the school. So we try to do a lot of those steps along the way because we ultimately would like to just get them engaged again. But that's a tough one. It is.
I have in my hand here a document that we received as a school board called the Federal Stimulus Information and so forth. And on the last page, there's a statement there that concerns me very, very greatly because it very much relates to what you're talking about. It says under these funds that the state must use funds to measure and address learning loss among students disproportionately affected by coronavirus and school closures. I have Dan, we've talked about this before. When these 1 out of 4 children who come back, somehow we have to assess where they are, what we need to do. Do you agree, Dan? We have to do this. Now, according to this, it becomes a state responsibility. But I know for a fact that we're not giving the, what is it called, PSSAs, we're not giving keystones, we're not giving any kind of achievement measures to our students. So we will have no clue where these kids are in May or June. Is that right? We will not know from that kind of assessment.
No, currently right now, we are still slated to give the PSSAs and keystones.
Oh, I didn't know that. They canceled them last year, Vince, but not this year. Thank you for telling me that. I did not know that. I did not know that because of last year's cancellations. Thank you. So we will get a true assessment. Now, will the kids, do you think the kids will come into school to take those tests? They almost have to, right? They have to come in and take them.
I'm not sure if I have any guidance on how that's going to be executed yet.
But
they are required. So far, the state is continuing to hold the line on requiring it. We use Acadians for reading measurements. We gave that at the beginning of the year while the kids were there. Depending upon when we see kids again, they can do it online or they can do it with us if they're back with us at some point. That will be a second data point that we can measure against the first data point. So we do have some measures, but yes, it is a difficult question. There's no question.
But I'm very, very, thank you very much for informing me. I did not know that they were going to reinstate the PSSAs and the keystones. And then I think Dan said before, it's going to have to be up to individual teachers to do a lot of assessment once they get the children there to find out what the regression factor is that we must remediate. And we're going to spend a lot of time remediating. Thank you very much. You've answered my question.
Mr. Clara, do you know, compared to a normal school year in attendance wise, because I know that there are attendance issues regardless of how they're learning, is it very much higher now than it was
It's certainly higher. And again, I wouldn't want to be held to because I can't remember the figure from last year versus this year. And even last year, the end of the year would have been a time that would be kind of lumped in with this year. But it is higher, yes. And I think the obvious reason is because when you're away from us, you have the option of choosing to be on or not, right? And we don't have a whole lot of control over that. When a kid is in a classroom and we're teaching, and if they're looking out the window, disengaged, proximity control, I guess stand next to you and remind you to be a part of it. If I'm not with you at all, there's a lot of expectation on the student to have to do that. And especially for our younger kids, that can be difficult if they don't have the support of a parent or family member or someone else. So I do think that's affecting it, Mrs. Smith. I think it is causing the numbers to be higher. I couldn't give you an exact figure. I could going forward, I can look into that for you, but I don't know it tonight and wouldn't want to hazard a guess that would be way off.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Mr. Masha,
Yes,
will you will be making a recommendation next week for K through 5?
yes, ma'am. I would come to the next board meeting with a recommendation from the administration.
Thank you.
A recommendation for what?
For a return for K through 5.
Oh, return to school. Thank you.
Yes.
Why can't all the kids go back to school? A/B schedule. I don't understand, like, all the kids are struggling. And they all need to be back.
Well, I'm
Child in 6th grade who's struggling tremendously. And I would hate to see just not everybody is important. Everybody needs to be back. Why can't we have a plan for that?
So I would like to see a plan that brings back K through 5 based on recommendations from the state, which that right now is their recommendation. But I think at the same time that we would move forward with that plan, there should be a plan on what are our measurements to measure success, and how soon after that do we bring back 6 through 12? Because that should be a plan. Like, it shouldn't just be open-ended that K through 5 is going to come back and we have no plan to bring back 6 through 12. I think that all needs to be discussed at the same time. But I think now the recommendation from the state is K through 5. That's where my K through 5 came from, because that was the recommendation.
Right, I understand that, but there's other districts that are doing everybody. So I don't understand why we can't, listen to the public. Everyone's saying, please, let's open these schools back up. At least A/B. There's lots of kids struggling. The work overload is tremendous. Kids should not be on their computers all day. They're not learning anything. Like, we need to get them all back, not just focus on K through 5. Connellsville's back. Like, I don't understand.
The K through 5, is that going to be every day, or is that going to be A/B?
That would still be hybrid. Well,
We still have to follow the guidelines of the state with social distancing, and we're just not capable of maintaining that social distance with everyone back full-fledged.
Then how is Connellsville doing it?
I'm not going to speak for what Connellsville's doing.
It's just a recommendation. It's not mandated, right?
Correct.
That's what we need to listen. Like, I don't understand. All these kids need to be back.
Yeah, at least AB, I mean.
So there's a problem if we have staff out. What happens to these kids? Like, that's, I will say I've had an awful lot of good feedback from K through 5. So an awful lot of good feedback. People are happy with the platform. People are very happy with the consistency of knowing that tomorrow we're going to be online versus going to school today and then they're not going tomorrow because we don't have enough staff. We have to shut down a building. Some school districts that have been back are already having busing issues because they don't have enough bus drivers. I did have a conversation with Mr. Showman, and that will be a struggle if we have a bus driver out with COVID and was around other people and more people have to quarantine. It takes a very long time to get a bus driver hired. So those are all concerns too of what will that look like? What will that look like if we have 10 teachers out and need substitutes. What will happen to the kids? Because obviously we're not going to double up. That defeats the purpose of an A/B system of then lumping all of these kids into classrooms. I mean, we've had these issues before. Subs have always been an issue. So I'm not saying that I'm solely in favor of only K through 5 go back. I'll be honest. I don't, Mr. Mash and I have had this conversation. I personally will probably vote no to anything next week. So not because Mr. Mash is making that recommendation, but because it is still not safe in our community to be at the numbers that the state originally said we should be at. So that's my thoughts, and you all have different thoughts, and that's fine. But I do get that the 6 through 12 need to be back. That's where I think the majority of our kids are struggling academically. Do I think that K through 5 is struggling socially and they are struggling because it's very hard for a kindergartner to learn online? Yes, I get that as well. But I think there needs to be some plans of what happens when we don't have a bus driver? What happens? That's already happened at Hempfield. So what happens if we don't have teachers? Do we lump kids into great big study halls? Doesn't that defeat the purpose of social distancing? So I don't know what the good answers are moving forward, and I don't know how we plan for every little thing that occurs. But if we go back, we're still going to have buildings shutting down. So I get it.
No, she doesn't.
I think that a lot of districts are doing a gradual comeback, like they're saying. I think, I'm trying to think if it was Bell Vernon or somebody's I saw was bringing back. They had a very specific plan, which I think is important for us to have. It can't just be a let's wait till the next board meeting to talk about middle school coming back, or the next boarding meeting after that to talk about the high school coming back. I think that all these things have to be addressed next week, and we need to have a plan for when we expect everyone to be back. At the same time, we have teachers who are high risk, and we need to have a plan for them too, because there are some teachers that I guarantee should not be coming back and are high risk. So if we need to say, hey, they can continue to teach from home, we'll get a sub for in their room. Whatever we have to do to accommodate everybody to give them their choice. So you want to go back, go back. If you're high risk and can't go back, then we'll get you a sub, you can teach from home. But I think we need to have all these plans in place. And like Michelle said, what happens if we don't have a substitute? I know my kids on good days when we didn't have COVID, were combining classrooms, which is a problem. So I think we just need to have a really good plan, and I'm hoping that'll be presented. Is that correct? Next week, Mr. Masha?
Yes.
Okay.
We still have to follow recommendations for pre-K to 12 schools following identification of cases of COVID-19. So those schools that are opening, they are also struggling with the fact that they have to close schools. So there's going to be a big inconsistency in the educational process whenever you're going opening, closing. So I think everyone needs to be aware that we still have to follow guidelines, and we have to amend our attestation form to reflect that. So, there is still a process bound by the state that we have to follow upon determination of COVID cases and the strict numbers involved. So I would like to point that out.
Can you tell us what those numbers are? Because I personally don't remember. Like for an example.
Small schools less than 500. It's 2 to 4 students in the same building.
So if there's 2 to 4 students in the same building, then you have to close the building? Is that what you're saying?
Yep. So you have to clean, yes. For medium schools, 500 to 900, it goes to
yes,
4 to 6 students, and then larger schools, which we would not be. None of our schools would be possible for that.
No students have gone.
I don't have that. Yes.
Are you as concerned about consistency of education? Is this kind of like you're just as concerned about the consistency of education because buildings are going to be shut down more frequently as you are the safety of the kids with COVID? It's not all about, it sounds like you're saying it's not all about you're scared kids are going to get COVID and spread it to everybody. It's also the education is going to be so inconsistent. Is that what you're saying?
That's a big concern of mine, yes, because right now, whether or not, you like it or not, there is a consistency because, the kids are remote now virtually, that's a consistent thing for them. If we go back to the hybrid, there's going to be a consistent thing. There'll be a consistent instructional plan for them. If we have to keep flexing back off of hybrid back into remote, depending on the circumstances that are taking place in the school, that's a major inconsistency for a lot of parents and kids. Parents have bringing their kids back in, and then their child care goes by the wayside. Then what do they do to scramble to get child care? There's just so many factors that are involved in this, and we really want to try to take the best interests of our students in mind, but you also have to take a look at all the other factors that are involved in these circumstances.
I had reached out to Dr. Claire earlier today in regards to finding out if we do bring back K through 5, what that will look like, because I'm sure there are some people who will continue to remain remote. And the number might be larger than it was when we were originally allowing some virtual during hybrid. Because I think people should have the opportunity to choose whatever they want to choose for the safety of their family. So is there a way for us to do that by teachers putting out that information? Because I think it's very important that we know that this teacher's students, how many are coming back from that particular classroom? Because obviously, if almost every student in that classroom decides to remain remote, that teacher may have to also remain a virtual teacher. So is there a way for us to do that based upon individual K through 5 teachers versus trying to put out a survey that wouldn't give us the exact information that we're needing?
So I did speak a little bit about that earlier, and there are ways that we could maybe share a form through a Google Classroom or post it somewhere. I hate to hit people with more surveys. I know that that's not always the thing that people want to do, but it would be helpful for us in terms of recognizing for whatever the model might be going forward, which way parents feel is best for them. And we're coming to a natural break point at the end of the second 9 weeks. That's a place where it would be good if someone wanted to change to make that change, because it wouldn't as adversely affect you as if you change from virtual to in person in the middle of the 9 weeks where you're changing teachers potentially. So that's a good question, and we need to come up with a way of being able to know that better. And we want to be flexible, but we also have to be realistic about making sure we're getting things done in a timely manner.
Mr. Clara, could I ask a question just logistically? If
Sure.
you are a student who, if we were to go send the elementary kids back to school hybrid, and you were a family that decided you wanted to continue virtual, generally speaking, you would not then continue with the same teacher. You'd be then placed with a teacher who was specifically a virtual teacher.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. So it's not as simple as just saying, okay, my child has the same teacher, but we're just going to do online at home. Like it's not quite that simple. They would be switching teachers and different things.
Right. Not quite that cut and dry.
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure.
I would like to point out also that, we had the superintendent conference with the IU today, and Dr. Fox, who's from Excella Health, was a part of that. School officials are in the 1B group to be vaccinated, and that is coming right around the corner. So I want that to be in the back of everyone's minds too, that if that becomes the reality, hopefully that's going to be able to facilitate us coming back at a faster pace too. But that's not even slated probably for another month maybe. And I don't want to say that definitively, but I mean it's around the corner. It's just when that's going to happen.
And do we know if the bus drivers, do they count as in that grouping with the teachers?
You know, that's a great question, Mrs. Raymond, and I'm going to have to ask about that. I would think that they would have to be because they're the ones getting them to our schools. So
Right.
that-
And
that is-
also in that category is also public transit workers. So you would think that, you know, school district transportation would fall within all of those things, but I didn't know if you had any definitive information about that.
No, but I will make sure that that's reported next week to the board. I do believe that would be true, but I would like to make certain that that is true.
Are you counting on 100% participation in the vaccine?
No. No.
And what are you doing about the teachers who don't get the vaccine?
That question was asked at the at our meeting today, and this is the response that I got. PDE stated that they would not require educators to be vaccinated.
Well, isn't it the same? We can't require students to be vaccinated either, right? I mean, nobody can require anybody to do anything. Or we shouldn't.
I mean, there's the reality is there's going to be a population of people that probably will not be vaccinated.
I don't think any employers are mandating the vaccine. I do feel better about a situation when the teachers have been offered a vaccine and refuse that on their own, then at least they were offered. That's my opinion on the vaccine.
I have a comment I'd like to make. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. We had a person, it was Jan Kiefer, and he asked, I think he asked Michelle to please provide the research evidence that it is dangerous to send our children back to school. Now, I can show you the evidence where they said it is not. It is absolutely not in spades. What evidence is there that sending our children back to school is dangerous?
Are you asking anyone in specific, Dr. Fike, or?
Anyone who can show me any research or evidence that said sending our children back to school is dangerous?
I do know that it was discussed at today's meeting that vaccinations will not be given to children under the age. I do believe one of them is under the age of 16 ones, and I apologize for not knowing which one's which.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they also, there's the other ones under the age of 18, and there was no indication whatsoever that they were going to be doing any studies on vaccinating children. But I don't know if that plays any part of this, Dr. Fike.
We now have up to 50,000 or more medical practitioners who said there is no danger to send our children back to school. I'm looking for evidence as to why we are not doing that.
So we were on a meeting a couple weeks ago that everybody on the board was invited to, and everybody, all admin were invited to that meeting as well through the IU. There were epidemiologists on that meeting from Children's Hospital, from Allegheny General, and from UPMC. And I don't think nobody there was saying children should not be in school. What they were saying, it is not worth the risk to send children to school. That's what every epidemiologist on that meeting with the IU said. Not one of them came back and said, oh, but don't you think this, or oh, but don't you think that? Every one of them reiterated the same exact thing, that it was not worth the risk to have children in school. Reiterate what Christy was saying, what Mrs. Smith was saying to Mr. Masha about, it's not just a matter of, do we not want to send these kids back to school because we're afraid of COVID? You know, when we have a teacher off, it's usually not just one teacher that's been exposed. It's usually multiple. So then we have several teachers who are in quarantine or unable to be in the classroom for 14 days. That means probably 10 school days that teacher is not going to be available. And maybe it's not one teacher, maybe it's 4 teachers, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 3 teachers and a bus driver. That plays into how we cover that. So it becomes a much bigger issue than just sending these kids back to school. I mean, if it was just sending the kids back to school, everybody wears a mask, nobody gets sick, we're good, we cruise through the rest of the year like that. But what do we do when these instances happen and then kids are out of school? Do we put on you can't go to, your class can't go to school today because you don't have a teacher? So I don't know, then maybe the next day, you know, 2 days later we get and we say, well, your teacher's going to move over to this classroom and now you all won't have school. So that we're rotating through so that the same classroom is missing school for 14 days. I don't know. I mean, I think that we wait and see next week what the recommendation is, and if we have a plan also to bring back 6 through 12, 3 weeks later, 2.5 weeks later, whatever that number is, and set a metric. You know, if we can't cover substitutes, then maybe that's something we need to look at. If we can't cover bus drivers, then maybe we need to look at that situation before we bring everybody back. But I think there should be some metric set for if we go through this 2.5 weeks of no problems, K through 5, then we bring everybody back on the hybrid like we were doing before, versus waiting until the end of February to do that. I think we should bring them back as soon as possible. That's
Michelle, when a person lives in the what if world, you can find 5,500 million reasons why you should not have children in school. The Greek philosopher Sophocles said, "What people believe will always trump that which is true." I once again ask, where is the research that says our children should not be in school? That's the truth. We put our children in school, and then it's our job to solve the problems that result in that. I don't live in the what if world. I know for a fact that they have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that 94% of all deaths labeled COVID were false. They're actually doing.
Okay, we're going to stop right there because
I'm not going to stop. I don't live in the what if world.
You're going to stop.
When you are lied to, and our children are paying a price. Our children are paying a price for this.
We're going to stop. Mr. Masha will make a recommendation next week moving forward, and the board will have a vote at that point. Hopefully we will have a better understanding from elementary as to how many kids will be returning and how many kids will be remaining virtual.
Don't you ever let me hear another school director say we're doing something because it's for the kids. I don't ever want to hear that phrase again after we have destroyed a year of their education.
I'm gonna back up for a second here because I don't think any member of this board has set out to destroy anything.
Oh yeah.
We had a pandemic that is unlike anything we've ever seen before in our lifetime. I don't think anybody sat here and made a decision to destroy anyone's life, Dr. Fike.
Yes, we have seen this before in our lifetime, Michelle, and as a medical professional, you should know it.
I don't think it was to this degree, Dr. Fike. Thank you.
No, it was worse. It was worse. Our children are being destroyed, and I cannot sit back when there is no research to support it.
Business managers report.
I was asked to provide to the school board and administration an update on our enrollments and costs and projected costs for cyber charter schools and the Sola, the Southmoreland Online Academy that utilizes the Westmoreland Intermediate Unit E-Academy platform. So you should all have received that this week. The alarming statistic is when I project the tuition for the full year and compare it to the budget for cyber charter schools, we have a potential deficit in that line item of nearly $695,000. Now, the enrollments are up from last year. We had 82 students in cyber charter schools. As of the date of this report, we have 133, but today I reviewed two more new ones that came in, and the Agora school has one more student. So their number is up to a total enrollment of 7, and that additional student is in regular education. So as the latest invoices come in, I will update this report and reissue it later. I also, on the lower half of the page, have the Sola information. We had 27 students, give or take, enrolled last year. And Mr. Masha counted them very nicely for me a couple days ago. We have 159 students this year. So that's an increase of 132. The year-to-date cost for our e-Academy, which consists of the annual consortium fee, the tuition charges, and projected equipment usage of $368,000, which projects to be $254,000 over the amount that we had budgeted for this year. And I compare the two sides, last year and this year. So at the bottom of the page is the projected budget variance for these two categories of nearly $949,000 over the span of the year. So we will keep a sharp eye on this category. I know we expected an increase from last year to this year, but unfortunately our estimate is missing the mark in how much more we added to the budget, especially for the cyber charter schools. Questions, comments?
So we are approximately $1 million. We have $1 million deficit right now in terms of paying cyber school and Sola tuition. Is that correct?
Well, not right now. No, that's projected through the whole year. So we would end the year.
I'm sorry, I meant for this year, for the year that we're in.
If it projects this way, yes, you're correct.
Where does that $1 million come from, Mr. Morneau?
Well, if we assume that our expenditure budget breaks even in every other category, then that would come out of our existing fund balances. If other categories of the budget come under budget, then that would help soften the blow in these two line items. We could very well end up at the end of the year with a deficit expenditure budget, which is very worrisome, but not much we can do about that at this point in time. Perhaps if the situation is such that students can return to school, as what has been discussed earlier, to bringing back elementary and staying virtual with high school, or coming back to a hybrid. And of course, with vaccinations being given out over the next several months, perhaps we will see students from both categories return to in-person education, which then would alter these projections.
Are you saying that kids who are in cyber school now will drop cyber school and come back? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying it's a possibility, of course.
Or they may not.
I'm sorry, at what point, there's got to be okay, you don't get a refund now because you've already paid. Does that differ for each cyber school? How does Sola work? Do we pay up front? Do we pay?
The cyber schools take the annual tuition per category, which is regular education, and there's a tuition charge for special education. And by law, they have to bill that on a monthly basis. So they get to bill on a 12-month basis. And then there's a reconciliation at the end. And of course, the reconciliation may end up that we might have overpaid them and we get a refund, and we have had that. Or the reconciliation may be that we underpaid them and have to pay them more. Sola, I don't know enough about Sola to tell you whether there are any types of refunds or not if a student drops out.
So do we pay by semester for Sola, by 9 weeks?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So for Sola, our costs are definite for the entire school year. So for example, we pay for semester courses by semester, and we pay for full year courses at the beginning of the school year for the full year. So my expectation is that we are not in a position where we will be getting any refunds from Sola enrollment for our students. And they are all currently enrolled for their semester courses for the second semester, because the second semester for Sola has already begun.
Okay, thank you very much. That's important information.
Thank you, Mr. Haichu. And the reason why I have an estimate for equipment usage fees, they bill that after the fiscal year is closed and the Sola program is closed. So I just estimated that based on the expected equipment usage fee that they charged last year.
While we're discussing this issue, I would like to bring up 2 points. First of all, we did have a budget committee meeting on January the 7th, I think it was. And it's my understanding that it was not taped, and that other than the people who were on the committee, the other school board members have not seen that meeting. Did any of you see that meeting?
No.
I don't think anybody did.
No.
Okay. Mr. Mornell said that, see, last year he gave us that preliminary budget on January 23rd. He sent I saw a copy of the email saying that he can't do that this year. So there were a number of very, very important issues that were discussed at that committee meeting. And because this is a discussion meeting and we're not going to have a budget, I would like to know if it would be possible for the rest of the board now to know what was discussed at that meeting.
Mr. Marnell, are you going to have the preliminary budget next week?
That is my goal.
Okay.
I am dependent on not only myself and my time that is put into it, but also the other 2 members of the business office staff. And unfortunately, the COVID virus has hit all 3, but fortunately, it has hit us at different times. Myself in November, the other secretary in December, and then at the start of last week, the payroll secretary became ill, as well as other members of the family. So we work as a team, and no man is an island. And the team has to pull together to produce all that goes into a budget. Now, my goal is to present numbers next week, much like I did last January. I'm not far off the mark. It's too bad that we've been hit with this pandemic and it has affected our workflow. But I did present some numbers last year, I think on maybe January 9th, January 15th, and then that official budget module, that official budget 3-ring binder on the 23rd. So yes, pieces are coming together. Work is progressing. I have finished forecasting our revenues for next year. I now have to work on forecasting to the best of my ability and what our final outcome might be when this fiscal year ends. And of course, what we just talked about regarding cyber charter schools and Sola is certainly going to be critical for that. So I have to try to predict how we're going to end and what effect that'll have on our fund balances. I contacted Westmoreland County today, and tomorrow they promised to have me the final locked-in taxable assessed value for our Westmoreland properties. I already have that for our Fayette property, so I should be, if they come through with their promise, I should be able to finish my forecast for property tax revenues for next year, then my revenue section will be completed. So yes, we are working on it. We are endeavoring to have numbers to you for next week. And if everything falls together, it might be possible to upload those numbers into that PDE form 2028. Our software company, the CSIU, provided the update to their program for doing the state required form. So the pieces are coming together, not as fast as I'm sure we would all like, but we are not ignoring the tasks, and we will put it together.
Dr. Fike, did you have specific questions? I just wanted to make sure that was coming.
I have specific answers. I wrote down the
question first. I think Dr. Fike, may I ask a question before you do?
Yeah.
Well, I guess before you give us the answers, but can you, didn't we need this budget by today? That's why we voted to have the budget by today for the Act 1 referendum.
Correct.
That's what was stated back in December. That's correct.
Correct. So why do we not have it today? Doesn't this make us kind of have to say forces our hand? And this happened last year too. I mean, we voted as a board that we wanted the budget done by today because we wanted the option to opt in.
We still have that option open.
And we voted to have the budget done today so that we could make that decision.
I believe that was done back on December 7th.
Correct. So how are we supposed to make a decision and vote on it next week?
You're going to work to try to get it before the board meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Marnell?
You could also advertise another meeting for the end of January.
Well, we voted to not do that because we didn't want to have another meeting and we didn't want to spend the money on advertising and spend the money paying.
No, advertising is a de minimis expense.
It doesn't matter. The board voted to have it done for today. I think that's the point, is that
The business office could not make it for today. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
The business office could not make it for today. Circumstances prevented us from completing that.
So the district is forced to make a decision that might not be in the best interest of the district. I'm just saying that if we weren't going to have it, we should have known before yesterday, is my problem. Because we decided over a month ago that that's when we wanted to have it for, and the first we heard about it was yesterday, that we're not going to have it. So I'm not sure how we make an informed decision. Mr. Botonic had all these dates and it was very specific on when we had to have certain things. Has that changed, or are we now locked into not doing this?
May I say something?
Yeah, I was asking you that question.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
In December, you did set targets. So my job is relatively easy in that the amount of time is nowhere near the amount of time that the business office and business manager has to devote to this. So I followed literally the instructions to have documents to you so that you could look at them. And if you had the numbers to plug in, fine. If you don't, then obviously we have a problem. Now, Mr. Marnell has laid out to you the difficulties that he has experienced in his office about having adequate number of people to work on this. I have to admit that this has also been some education for me, in the sense that I didn't fully comprehend until Mr. Marnell and Mr. Mash and I had a discussion about this, that in order to do the PDE 2028 form, you just can't take, like in the old days, a pencil and plug in numbers. I'm not sure if that was my conception of it. I would think you wouldn't want to do that, but I didn't fully understand all of the backup to this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Marnell, but as I now better understand it, essentially, Mr. Marnell has to work through building up an entire budget and then translate that into, is it another software package that then feeds into the 2028?
That's correct.
And you can't just bypass it and decide, oh, here's the numbers I want for the 2028. Doesn't work that way. Can't do it.
Correct.
So we've all been engaging in a kind of mutual, I don't know what to call it, but, you know, trying to move forward. There's concerns that come up. Thought was, oh, this, you know, can't get it done. Then, well, what if we try this? What if we try that? So we kind of went from, I guess it was Thursday at board docs time to it looking like this isn't at all possible, to further discussion on Wednesday that, well, if we try this and do certain assumptions, that then you've got a shot at getting it done for next week for the next week's board docs. So yes, that's not perfect. But on the other hand, Mr. Masha, Mr. Marnell, and I all took the attitude that, well, okay, we're behind schedule, but rather than just throwing in the towel, let's take another look at this and how else can we, you know, maneuver, make certain kinds of moves to try to get back on track to getting it done. So that's why we are where we are now. It is also true that if it can't happen on the 21st, theoretically speaking, you could still back up to the 28th. And yes, that would create an extra meeting this month and an extra meeting next month. So you're aware of that. I kind of fleshed that out for you in the language of the resolutions about deadlines and previously in some other documents I gave you about the timeline. So that's where we are.
Mrs. Williams, may I make a comment also?
Yeah, I had a couple comments as well.
I just would like to really point out that there have been people in the business office that have really been very sick and they've been working.
Mr. Masha, can I stop you? Because that's one of my comments.
Yeah, you can't.
We should not be discussing anyone's health online, in public, amongst ourselves and amongst the public. It's disrespectful. If you want to speak on your own health issue, I feel that's on you and that's within your right. But I would certainly hope that we're not going to discuss coworkers' illnesses.
Good, valid point.
With that being said, I also want to remind everybody that we sat in this exact position last year, saying that we needed to start the budget process sooner so that we were not backed up into this position where we're having to pay Mr. Patonic 2 extra meetings. We were supposed to start working on this budget immediately after we finished last year's budget. So there should not be this like big scramble in 10 days to try to get this done, or even from December 7th to today, because we knew that this was the direction that the board was probably going to go, because that's what we said last year and we wanted this sooner. So COVID aside, I think we should be in a better position this year than we were last year. And I feel like we're right back in the same position. That's my only other comment. Hopefully we will have something presented next week. Dr. Fike, I'm sorry.
Now, Michelle, what I'm asking the board, do they want the information that came out of the budget committee meeting? That's my question. Does the board want that information?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Okay, there were 3 people there. I know I asked questions, I have answers. Maybe Gail and Candace would like to go ahead and give their reports. Then I'll give mine.
they might not be prepared because I think committee
Well-
reports are supposed to be the
Yeah,
second meeting of the month, Dr. Fike. So I'm assuming they were prepared to do one for next week.
This is big time budget, Christy, big time budget stuff.
I'm just saying, I know like for my committee, I'm supposed to give a report next week. So they may have been preparing for next week.
Okay, so you don't want this information. You
Oh,
don't
no,
want-
I definitely want it. I'm just saying, if you're calling them out to do it, they might not be ready today. They might have been preparing for next week.
Okay, well, I am ready if the board is interested. And what I did is I went over the budget and I wrote down the questions that I had for our committee meeting. The first one was, and I'm not sure that the school district knows, the board knows this, we owe a shade under $22 million on our buildings. I think that's something that is very important because we pay something like $2.5 million every year up until 2029 on our debt service. So our debt service is a shade under $22 million. On the early retirement income payments, we owe a huge amount of money. And that brings you to the assigned fund balance and the unassigned fund balance. The assigned fund balance is $207,463. The unassigned fund balance is $3,048,000, which brings the total fund balance to $3,279,243. I did ask when the auditor would be giving the public report. I'm assuming that will be soon. I asked the current cost per pupil, which is you take our 1,808 pupils divided into our budget. And he didn't have the figures, but I computed it. It comes out to $17,304 per student per year. And that's for regular education. But for cyber education, we are now paying $11,027 for cyber students, but we pay $24,614 for any student in there who is a special ed. I asked about the cost of health insurance premiums. And this year, if you are a single person who has no dependents, they pay the premium is $575 a month. A parent and one child is $1,391 a month. A parent and more than one child pays $1,437 a month. A couple pays $1,552 a month, and a family is $1,592 a month. The teachers pay 8% of that premium, and most of the administrators pay 8%, but there are some who pay more. And then when you look at cafeteria, you look at the secretaries, and say there are different amounts, especially among the custodians. The current pension rate this year is 34.94%. And that is an increase of 1.25% or 0.43%. I still haven't figured out, he gave us both those numbers, but I don't know which one is which. The current Social Security rate is 7.65%, half each. We are paying $69,000 a year for workman's compensation. $69,000 a year, workman's compensation. Our liability premiums and all that for insurance, we pay $232,721. I did ask what is the current per capita income in our district and household income. Mr. Petonic explained that they're competing the census, and that is that is a factor that they have to look at. We now have 1,808 students in our district and 133 cyber school, and there are others, but this determines our ADMs, our average daily membership payments from the school. In other words, Southmoreland will get the amount of money from the state to pay for as many students as we have. And I believe Mr. Marnell explained that does not count cyber students. I think that's what he said. Another concern I had was about the financial recovery status, and he said that's not a problem. But I did go over a concern that I've had for a long time. The building capacity in Southmoreland is, we have capacity for 2,841 students, and right now we have 1,808 students, which means we have 1,033 empty seats in our buildings, 1,033 empty seats. I asked how many households in Southmoreland have a child in school. I have been told that it's 1 out of 4. The 3 out of 4 households in our school district don't have children in school. I did get an update on the 27-year study. Thank you, Mrs. Terrazin. You did a beautiful job for me. But the one big thing that I asked for was a comprehensive, my position is the best decisions are informed decisions, and you can only make good decisions when you have the facts. And what I've asked for is a comprehensive document presented to us that shows us how many students we have, how many kids are in each class, that kind of thing, because 68% of our budget is salaries for personnel. That's the elephant in the room. And if we've lost 133 students to cyber school, maybe there's a change, maybe there's not, maybe we have to hire more people, I don't know. I can't make a decision, a conscientious vote, if I don't have a chart showing me, this is how many teachers we have, this is how many courses we have, this is how many kids we have in class, and so forth. And I've asked them to do that. And I did mention to Mr. Nash before the meeting started, he said that he would meet with the administrators, because they would be the ones who would prepare such a source of information to let us know about staffing needs, student needs, and so forth, so that when we look at this budget, and as we spoke earlier, we do have approximately a potential $1 million deficit in terms of cyber school. These were just some of the things that we went over. It was a very productive meeting. It was only about an hour and a half long. There was a lot of information that was covered. There are some things that we still need to get, but Mr. Marnell said that he'll be giving you this information next week. It was my understanding he couldn't, but I'm wrong on that. He says he can, so that's good. That's good. But these are some of the notes that I took notes in the meeting, and these are the things that we discussed and the questions that I asked. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would concur with what Dr. Fike has presented. That is a very thorough and accurate description of the meeting and what we discussed. So thank you very much, Dr. Fike.
Thanks.
Can I ask you, Dr. Fike, what were the building, how many seats do we have and how many are filled?
Oh, I can give you that right here. Okay. The high school capacity, Mrs. Love, is 1,050, and we have 554 students now.
Okay.
Now, they combined the middle school and elementary because it was, the building is, it's for 1,416 students, and all, but you put all that together is 985. 985. We have 985 students in those two buildings. It was built for 1,416. Alverton was built for 375. We have 269 in there. So we have a total of 1,808 students with capacity for 2,841. And that's where my numbers came from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, those are from the Piper Jaffray, the Department of Education, the architects and the engineers. Those are the people who gave us those numbers. And as I said, Peggy gave me the 27-year report, which is fabulous. I hope you all got that. And it shows how many kids are in each grade level per building. So that's how I calculated that.
Thank you.
Is it possible for us to get a better breakdown of the middle school versus the elementary school?
You know what, Michelle, if you get that 27-year report, Mrs. Terrazin, can you give that report that you gave me to her? You can, it says grade 3, grade 1, grade K1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. You can just add up the numbers, Michelle.
Right.
You know exactly how many are in each building, yes.
Right, but I wanted a breakdown of like you gave us 1,416 total. Like I want to know what capacity is of each of those buildings separately, because I think that's important information.
Okay, the only information I could get, Michelle, is see when they built it all at the same time. And I couldn't, Michelle, let me tell you something. When I was on the board the last time, I sat in the kitchen down there in the old administration building, and I spent days going through every single page of architectural drawings, counting the number of seats and everything else. I did try to get that information. I'm sure you can get it, but the best I could come up with is, this is what I have. I have 459 students in the middle school and 526 elementary. But when you add those up, it's 985 for the building. That I thought I was talking about buildings, but the numbers are 554 at the high school, 459 at the middle school, 526 elementary, and then 269 at the primary center. But when you add up the two, the building, their capacity is written up as 1,416. It's just the stuff I could get off the records.
Thank you.
I'm curious to see how they get those numbers, if they just take the square footage and divide it by a certain number they have, and then they figure out how many students are could fit in the building.
There's a report that I have had for years called the Eccles, is it the Eccles? Eccles, is that their name? The Eccles report, and in that is where they had these numbers, Jason. I don't know how they did it. I'm not an architect, but I'm just telling you, those are the numbers that when they built the school, they had to apply for money from the state to say how big the school would be. And these are the numbers that I could find and how they calculated. That would have been done, what, about 11 or 12 years ago when they did the calculations for building.
I'm just wondering, I think what Mr. Polakowski is wondering too, is that a classroom, or are we like taking square, like he said, square footage, and you can divide that out, and each student in the building is supposed to be allowed so many square feet, but if you're in gymnasiums and cafeterias in there.
Michelle, when I went through the architectural drawings, and they're great big things, you lay them on a table and they're great big pages, they did it by classroom. Because
Okay.
they had like principal's office, guidance counselor's offices, nurses' offices, they had gymnasiums, all that stuff. These were just classrooms that I could find in those drawings.
The last time we had, we refinanced a bond, or maybe the time before last, their publication said how many, what our building capacities were also.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the auditors has a number, but I'm positive that last feasibility study that we had done had that information also. I think I lent it to somebody.
Jason, I use the Piper Jaffray report. I use that Piper Jaffray report. That's the one you're talking about with I use those numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
Those are Piper Jaffray numbers, and they're consistent with the other numbers too. They're the same. Yeah. The Piper Jaffray, the report you're talking about, I used. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I wonder, bond council people, how did they get those capacity numbers of our schools other than taking the square footage of the buildings and having some number to divide them by and saying, hey, this is the capacity of the building. So,
well, Jason, when you look back, this is that 27-year report. This is that 27-year report that you can get from Mrs. Tarazan, and it'll show you way back when we had these same buildings, how many students were in them. It'll show you, for example, in the year 2000, they show how many students, 108, 210, 100. They'll show, you can look at this report and you can actually see how many students were in the actual buildings that we have. You can look at 209, 210, 212. You can look at that. You can see how many were in there.
Mrs. Tarson, can you email the rest of the board that report?
Yes, I will make sure and do that tomorrow.
And Dr. Pike, just so you know, I don't think you got the email today. We did get an email about the audit.
Oh, did you? Oh.
We did not get the audit. We just got an email that there has to be a meeting about the audit with the
thank you, Christy.
auditing company, I think.
Thank you for telling me that. I didn't know. I just didn't know when that was.
Came today.
I remember from last year when we got it.
That's a different audit, I do believe. Are you talking about the financial audit, Dr. Fike, that was just done through the business office?
No, the auditor's report. Don't you get an auditor's report like in the spring?
Are you talking about from Mr. Turnley?
Yeah.
Okay, Christy, the report you're
Are we
speaking.
talking about two different ones?
Yes.
Auditor General's office.
Never mind, that was from the Auditor General's office.
Oh, okay. Because that's the one that Mr. Petonic followed up and explained some legal aspects of what our concerns should be. And we were not on the board, but we were there in the audience when that was given. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get one. Yeah.
I think just to clarify, annually, the school district auditor, Mr. Turnley, CPA, does his audit. Last year, I don't think we ever got to him actually giving the report to the board because of combination of factors and then COVID hitting. The email that was sent to me today was a different kind of audit that is done by the Auditor General's office. And I don't know which year it relates to.
Oh,
So they tend to be more distant in time. But I actually don't know what year it relates to.
Davis, I apologize. You're absolutely correct. It was a year before we came on the board that we were there. This year, after March 17th, the world ended. No, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. We heard that report the year before that. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess you're talking about the sort of like explanation I gave financial recovery, which is a
Right.
totally different
Right.
subject. Well, I shouldn't say totally different. I mean, there's some relationship to it, but that was to explain the statute and how it might relate or not relate to the school district.
Well, I thought it was one of the finest things you ever gave, because what you were trying to say is when you make decisions, be aware of the situation so that when you make decisions and vote on things, you know what the possible consequences are. I mean, I just thought it was wonderful, David.
Thank you. Are there any other business questions for the business manager? Okay, solicitor's information.
President Williams, do you want me to give my comments when we get to the point in the agenda where it's relevant to that topic, rather than just talking about all of them in advance and being distantly removed from the particular subject? How do you want me to handle this?
That would be better.
Okay.
Do you have anything here then, Mr. Petonic?
So at this point, then, I need to look at my agenda. Well, the next thing would be Roughsdale. So we've had the closing on Roughsdale, and I included in the public document a copy of the check from the supervisors of East Huntington Township for $138,500 and some dollars. We previously had received $10,000 as down payment money. So the total sales price minus a proration of the rent has been accomplished and accounted for. We actually received the rental payment for January and cashed the check. And so we were entitled to the first 5 days, and the rest of that is owed to the township. So that was subtracted from the purchase price to not have to keep sending checks back and forth. That's it.
Hey, David, where is that money? We don't use that for bills, right? It goes somewhere special, isn't that right?
Well, it's supposed to be used for the capital account.
So it goes into a special account that was
You
deposited.
need to use it for capital expenditures, not ordinary expenses.
Oh, but it's not a separate account. It's part of the budget, but it can't be used for anything other than capital projects. Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Mr. Pushkar, could you please let Mr. Carson back in?
Are there any other questions on Roughsdale? Okay, JCWS information only.
That's there, if I may explain, just so you have those documents available, because they were previously in the agenda for, I think, either November or December. So they're there for informational purposes, so you don't have to go looking for them. And then the next item immediately after that, if I may, is the actual Jacobs Creek Watershed landowner agreement. And in reviewing that, I thought that the sections needed to be clarified as to the fact that if the cost would trigger prevailing wage, that they're promising that they will, in effect, take care of that, make sure that the appropriate designations are obtained and the appropriate wage determination made. And if it doesn't, then, to indicate that. And I thought the project description was just a little bit vague, so I just asked that that be changed. So what happened was Taylor Robbins, after I sent out some emails, sent back the fact that those items could be inserted into their form. She didn't actually type it in, though. She typed in one of them, but not the other one. So you now have, by looking at the form of the contract and the two things that I mentioned in the resolution, that you have those additional clarifications and protections and are in a position to move forward. As I understand it, it's supposed to be a spring project, so it should be on the agenda this month to deal with it.
Are there any questions?
So Dave, everything on your end's okay? Did we find out who put the fence on the other one? Do we need a fence on this one?
I don't know. I'm talking about the legalities of it. I don't know who put the fence up on the other one. I mean, this is really distant from where people are supposed to be.
Yeah, I remember talking about it when that other one was built, because kids going out there for gym and things like that might get whatever. I know it's not a swimming pool, but we do have people during football games walking up and down that area. I don't know if there's any thought of that by Mr. Masha or any of the principals, or do we need one? I mean, that's going to be a cost for us. I imagine Jacobs Creek's not going to pay for a fence.
That would be a consideration, Ms. Polakowski. I know that the one behind the middle school, a fence was placed there because that was in close proximity to the phys ed fields for the middle school and also for the recess playground area for the elementary. So you are correct there. It is close proximity to the stadium, so we might need to evaluate whether or not a fencing is appropriate there. And I do believe that there is practice fields behind there also for middle school. So we'll have to take a look at that property.
I mean, I don't think anybody's going to walk through it during the day, but in the evenings when, that's pretty busy on Friday evenings. But
I have a question, Mr. Tonic. Is that covered under our insurance? Are we insured against something like that?
Premises liability, we have coverage for that.
Okay, now I'm a simple-minded soul here. What we're talking about is giving them possession or ownership of this land, land ownership agreement.
No, we own it. That we're letting them install this at their cost.
Okay, and then we're responsible for all maintenance forever. Is that right?
Yes.
I think that in light of Mr. Polakowski's question, we really need to have that answered. And then we would need to have an estimate of what this fence is going to cost us, because we're right now working on putting together a budget. I think if that's money we're going to need to spend, I think that's something we're going to need to know.
I'm having a hard time precisely visualizing this location, but it's partially in a hillside. I don't know what you think near is, so maybe we need a measurement from the projected location to where the nearest playing field or something is. My,
Oh, sorry.
my picture of it is that it's in an area where people wouldn't normally go. It's not the same situation as behind the middle school where that garden was put in and it was adjacent to the field that was used as a soccer field, and it was used for phys ed, and then you had another field. It was like two different fields were close to it and used. I'm having trouble visualizing that it's anywhere near that close to something that would be actively utilized by children.
If I could
But
just,
maybe
when,
an actual measurement could be done by our supervisor of buildings and grounds with the drawings that were supplied to us, so it would have a more factual, location of this.
if I could just interject, when we had the lady who was from the Watershed Association with us a few meetings ago, one of my concerns was similar to Mr. Polakowski's, in that I know sometimes people like park over there for football games and things like that. So I was worried about if someone would be able to drive near it, things like that. And I do remember one of the things she said, and I don't know if this eliminates the problem, but she did said part of the plans of the things that they would be planting in this garden included 2 trees. So it wouldn't necessarily just be low plants. There would be trees that would kind of set it off as being kind of separate. So like I said, I don't know that that solves the problem or answers any of the questions, but that was one of the things, because I thought the same thing. As people are over there parking, you don't want anyone to drive into it and get stuck in a ditch. So that was one of the things that she had said, is there'd be trees that would kind of mark it off and you'd be able to know that there was something there. So I don't know if that, helps at all.
That's all I had to present on that.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, Jacobs Creek Watershed Landowner Agreement.
That's what we just did essentially.
I'm sorry, okay. Act 1.
The board will be asked to consider the Act 1 resolution to opt out or possible referendum to exceed the Act 1 index.
Are there any questions?
Yes, Michelle, when we discussed this at the budget meeting, I asked for a budget that contained no tax increase. When you talk about Act 1, you're assuming a 4.1% tax increase, and nobody's going to tell me it's otherwise. I want to see a budget with no tax increase.
That would be easy to do, right? Give us both options.
Mr. Marnell would have to tell you
I mean,
that.
wouldn't it just be taking out the tax increase and showing what?
Well, you'd have to adjust the budget to go with that input and intake and output. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't speak for him on that. I don't know.
Mr. Marnell.
So, I think what Dr. Fike is saying, she would like to see a balanced budget without a tax increase.
Yeah.
Not necessarily giving us what the budget is with a tax increase. Like, we would have to make all the adjustments to make.
You have to make adjustments. You have to make the adjustments.
Right. Well, that would be a little more difficult, probably.
Are there any other questions?
Well, I guess if Dr. Fike's asking about that, I'm assuming the answer is yes, that if we had a budget without a tax increase, I'm assuming that we would have to take money from a lot of places. Is that a correct assumption, or do we not know yet?
Well, you did that last year, Christy. You did that last year. Remember those 2 lists we got?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
I foresee a lot of big programs getting cut doing that.
Well, you know, the Act 1 tax increase is only $400 and some dollars or something. $431,000. It's not a huge amount of money. It's not really, it's not even much of a percentage of our budget. Am I right, Mr. Marnell? 400,000 or 350,000 or something like that?
Yeah, that's very close.
Yeah, I mean, we owe just on the teachers' retirement ERIP payments almost that much money. I mean, it's not a lot of money. So we're going to be making adjustments one way or the other.
But that's the amount we could increase without having to do Act One, correct? Isn't it that if we wanted to increase more than that is what would require Act One? Is that correct?
You know, I can't just get the exact figure from Mr. Marnell.
Yes, it would require a public referendum vote
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
to exceed the Act One index.
Well, and I
That's
think we
been
do.
successful one time in 100 years.
And I, there would be no chance of that happening. Well, I shouldn't say no chance. It would be like 0.00001 chance of that happening. That's why doing an Act One budget is really, I don't know.
Waste of
I mean,
energy.
It is a waste of time. We don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say.
It's not a waste of time because we need that budget to start planning what's going on. We're in serious danger here. We have 4 contracts up. I don't think it's a waste of time at all to do a budget right now. I think that's why we voted that we wanted a budget last month, because we wanted to be able to start working on this now because we have 4 contracts that are up at the end of this school year.
And I think, we can all say we don't think a referendum would ever get passed, but if we present a budget that means this is getting cut, that's getting cut, this is getting cut, taxpayers may not appreciate that and they may consider a referendum. Like we can't predict what the taxpayers will do or not. If we come in and say, oh, hey, this big, huge program is gone, then who knows how people react to that. I just don't want to get pigeonholed into saying, oh, it's a waste of time, we shouldn't do it. I don't want to get pigeonholed into that.
No, I don't want to be forced to make that decision either, because I'm telling you right now, I guarantee that I don't want to lose teachers. I don't want to lose programs. So if it takes us raising taxes, that's what we do. If it takes us putting it out there, we have to be responsible to do everything we can to make sure we have the money to run the school.
I agree.
And with 4 contracts up and with $1 million deficit that we were just told about from cyber schools and barely eking by last time, I think that we have to have all options open. And I definitely do not think it's a waste of time.
I agree.
I agree that I want to make the best fiscal decision that we can moving forward. And I don't think we can't opt in or out without knowing a starting number. Whether we opt out or not, we need to know that number before we do an opt out. Does anybody else have? Dr. Fike, I'm sorry, did you have something?
I do want to caution you that if you go above Act One index, put on the referendum and it fails, you're back to square one anyhow. So make sure you do your math both ways, with and without it.
I agree. Of course, if an act fails, there's going to be cuts if we're in that position. I think we just need to know what position we truly are in moving into next year. Does anybody else have anything on Act One? Okay, procedure, additions to agenda in virtual, telephonic, or electronic mode.
Board will be asked to approve a resolution for procedures additions to each meeting in virtual, telephonic, or electronic mode.
Yeah.
Is it possible that someone can mute their? Okay.
Dogs, kids.
Are there any comments on this item?
I do have something to say.
Okay.
I did this to make sure that, we move forward and have something to discuss. I sent an email to Mr. Masha and Mr. Pushkar and Mrs. Tarson before the start of the meeting. I don't even know if they've had a chance to look at it. But I guess one of the issues with this is we're trying to address the problem of how to efficiently handle people who wish to give public comment to, you call them walk-ons, but they're essentially changes to the agenda after the agenda has been put out. And obviously, we don't want to obstruct the necessity to do necessary business or the will of the majority. But we also want to have an orderly process. So one of my objectives here was to try to encourage all of these to be held for one point, and as the board had previously indicated, so that you could have a recess, and then that recess would be the time for everybody to call in. And if there were like 2 or 3 of these, they'd be calling in and queuing up for those 2 or 3, rather than doing this sequentially and having to do separate 5-minute recesses for each one of them, which would, could really drag out the meeting. One area that I think needs to be discussed, and I don't know if it can be resolved here or if it has to be discussed further between Mrs. Tarson, Mr. Masha, and Mr. Pushkar and myself, is this. One of the objectives also appeared to be that Mrs. Tarson's trying to take notes of the meeting, and it can be something of a chore to manage phone-ins. If we have the 5-minute recess, Mr. Pushkar sent an email to me indicating that the phone call comes into him. What he's going to be essentially doing is holding his cell phone next to the microphone. I don't know, if there's a better way to do that, that would be clearer, less likely to be interrupted, on the one hand, or if by but by queuing them into that specific location, if it's any easier or better for Mrs. Tarson to manage it. So sort of need comment from them, I guess, as to, what the choices are here for the best way to handle this.
Yeah,
As to whether the person who's calling in other words, should they be calling a number that goes to Mr. Pushkar, or a number that goes to Mrs. Tarson, or somebody else for that matter? This is separate.
Last time.
This is separate. This is separate from the process where you call in ahead of time to sign up to be able to hear only, because you don't have internet, the meeting by phone, or to sign up for the very beginning of the meeting. This is to solve the problem where something comes up in the course of the meeting where you want to amend the agenda. So I just wanted to make clear that, we don't make something worse.
I thought we had said that I thought we discussed this at the last meeting, and that Mr. Pushkar would take the calls and then give them the information to get on the Zoom meeting at the appropriate time.
No, this is not to get on the Zoom meeting. This is for them to call in.
Right. Well, right. But that's what people do to get on the meeting at the beginning.
No, they call Mrs. Tarson in advance when she's not taking notes.
Right. So what I'm saying is we had discussed them during the meeting. If something comes up,
yes,
or we walk something on and we have to have citizens' comments, they can call Mr. Pushkar. He can email them the link, just like their email.
That's half the problem. The other problem is if they don't have internet and they don't have Zoom, they have a telephone or a cell phone, or a flip phone, and they want to call in the comment. Okay.
Yeah, he just gives
then
them
the way that gets transmitted is that he will hold once it's their turn to speak. He has to get on with them and then hold his cell phone next to a microphone. And I don't know. I would like him to comment on, whether or not that's a distortion problem or not. That's all.
The Zoom meeting has a phone number you can call.
Okay, so like you saw Mr. Sekrchek. Mr. Sekrchek participated tonight without internet. He called in a phone number. if during the course of the meeting, people wish to comment on something they've basically heard, they don't have internet, but the only way they would have been able to see anything that they wanted to comment would have been by viewing YouTube. But if during the course of the meeting, they wish to comment and they had not made prior arrangements, they can call the advertised number that we have for me, and I will convey to them a phone number that they call with their phone and enter, and they will be prompted to enter in the meeting code and the passcode, and they will essentially be connected as a phone caller to this Zoom meeting and participate and be able to comment just as Mr. Sekrechek did earlier this meeting.
Okay, what is the difference between that and your explanation that there would be some situations when you would hold your cell phone in front of the microphone?
Well, and that was only in, that was a last resort. That's a last resort way of doing it. If people struggle with the difficulty of entering in the meeting IDs and passcodes into their touch tone phone, we can still, as a last resort, they can be on a phone call with me and I will hold it up and they can be on speakerphone and you can hear them. That is not the desired method of them communicating. The best way for anyone to comment during the meeting, as the meeting is in progress, it would be to dial into the actual Zoom meeting, provide the meeting ID and the passcode.
Okay, when they dial in by phone, will they use this 887-2065 number? Did I state it correctly?
No. When they dial into if they need to comment during the meeting, yes, they will call that number and then I will give them a phone number to call with a meeting ID and a passcode.
Thank you.
It's a two-step process. They call me,
Okay.
provide them the information, then they make another phone call and connect to the Zoom.
Are there any other questions on this?
And so just to be clear, because we don't have this policy in place is why we're not voting to go back to school tonight, because we can't. We don't have a policy in place. This is
We
what
don't have a voting
told, right?
meeting tonight.
I'm sorry?
This isn't a voting meeting.
No, I mean to walk something on. We don't have a policy for people to comment is what you told us at the last meeting. So we can't walk on a vote for anything until we get this policy voted for next month.
Well, I think, I don't know that I agreed to that with your statement of that. I felt that there was a mechanism for people to comment. By signing up for the beginning of the meeting. I think this makes it much clearer. You're going to have a clearer way for everybody to know how to be able to comment during the course of the meeting if they didn't sign up for the beginning, and especially if they, to cover the possibility that there's somebody who might want to comment even though they weren't watching on YouTube because their neighbor was watching YouTube and, notify them, hey, they're going to be doing this thing that you're concerned about. So you've covered that too.
So that and walk-ons.
Pardon?
That and it covers that situation. And if for some reason we would have to walk something on to be voted on at a non-voting meeting and people need to comment.
You can't vote on something at a non-voting meeting.
I think you're confused, Christy, because so many of our discussion meetings were turned into voting meetings as well. But it's my understanding that for a discussion meeting, you couldn't vote on anything at all unless it had been specifically advertised as a voting meeting.
Okay, so you can't ever do that.
Not unless it's been advertised as some sort of vote.
Okay, so that's why we can't vote on anything today, because it wasn't advertised as a voting meeting.
Correct.
Right.
Now, are you saying that we would not accept public comment on something that was brought up in the discussion meeting?
No. That's not what I'm saying. Christy was asking why we couldn't walk on for voting to go about changing how school is going. And we can't walk anything on tonight because this is not a voting meeting.
Okay,
but
see,
our
I thought,
citizens-
I was confused. I thought that if we had, I was wrong. I thought that if we had some way for people to comment on something, I guess that's just if you walk something on during a voting meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So
And I
even
think-
if we wanted to vote tonight, which we can't, because it is a discussion meeting.
Okay,
Right.
what if we walk something on during a discussion meeting, Christy, right?
You
Well,
can't, that's what we're saying you
We're
can't
not
do.
voting, so I don't think they'd have to
Oh, to just discuss.
have a comment. They could wait till the end, because we're not voting.
You of course could walk on something to
Yeah.
discuss,
Right.
Yeah.
correct? And then somebody could call in to comment on that at the end of the meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I was all mixed up. I'm sorry. That was me. I thought there was some way we could vote when we can't, and we can't. So
Okay.
some of these rules don't make sense to me. I know they're the rules. I'm sorry. I got confused.
And
Well,
I
no,
do think it's
Christy,
been confusing because we've had so many discussion meetings that have also turned into
Yeah.
voting meetings. I think that's also where the
Maybe
confusion comes
maybe
from.
that's what I'm thinking of. I apologize.
That's a good point.
Well, I'm confused though. I didn't see anything on the agenda that specifically said, when are we bringing our children back to school? But yet we had discussion tonight about that. So it would seem to me that the public should have a right to discuss our discussion.
It was part of the
Well,
superintendent's report.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Fike,
And-
Dr. Fike, I would say that they still have opportunity to do that at the end of the meeting
Yeah.
or
I
at the
think they
beginning or at the beginning of next meeting prior to any votes.
Correct.
The only time we would stop a meeting during the meeting is if a item was walked on during a voting meeting. We would have to give people time to comment on that prior to the vote.
Correct.
Okay. All right, any other discussion?
Are we ever going back to meetings in person?
What was that?
Are we ever going back to meetings in person?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, I hope this isn't a forever deal.
What has to happen for that to take place? Just so we know. I know that we're not going to vote to do it tonight or for next month. But if we could, I know last time we tried to go back, we were thrown all of these different things that we didn't realize would have to take place first before we can go back to in-person meetings. So is that something we can start working on? Because I do think if kids are going back, teachers are going back, we need to figure out a way to be back so people can come in. Are there specific hurdles we need to?
I will revisit our last proposed plan and present that again.
Just
Okay,
off
thank
the
you.
top of my head, it's, you still haven't solved the problem.
What do
You were
call it?
about to hire a
Video.
videographer and then ultimately didn't. So you have that issue. If you if you limit yourself to the meeting room and don't plan on having expansion into the gymnasium, that simplifies matters, because then you run into the possibility of needing the gymnasium. I don't know if you ever have athletic events at the same time as a school board meeting, but I think it's happened on occasion. So you just need to be aware of that. I guess the other question is, at what point do you feel that the epidemic, the pandemic, has been adequately dealt with by the percentage of the population that has been vaccinated? That's not for me to answer, but it's a question.
Well, I think we're dealing with some of that in every decision we make. And I think that if we can figure out a way to safely send the kids back, we can figure out a way to safely have our board meetings in person too. And I think we're all,
the
follow the guidance.
Option for people who
Yes.
cannot attend
Yes.
in-person meetings.
Yep. The same thing for teachers.
And that means that coming back also means that every person on the board needs to be following all of the social distancing guidelines, masking 6 feet apart, so on and so forth. So all of those things need to be followed along with options for people to not attend if they're more comfortable with that.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe could we maybe get a couple people to start looking at that and see?
Mr. Pushkar and I had devoted a large amount of time previous, so we'll revisit all that.
Thank you.
I know Mr. Smithola and Mr. Pushkar and I were working on that.
Is there anything else? Pupil transportation subsidy change.
Board will be asked to approve a resolution to effectuate pupil transportation subsidy changes for the school year 2020-2021 pursuant to School Code Section 1501.8 ML.
M.1.
I'm sorry.
Do you wish me to comment?
Yes.
What I did was I made part of the board docs a summary of this that was put on by Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officers that Mr. Marnell and I watched. And I've learned that it may be difficult or impossible for some of you to simultaneously look at something that's been emailed to you in the email and also be able to access the Zoom meeting. So I don't know if you want to do this. Mr. Pushkar does have the ability to bring up on the screen the, I guess it's about 7 pages that make up this discussion. The short explanation of it, and if you want to go into greater detail, then I would recommend that we put that up on the screen, is that essentially what's happened here is that the General Assembly, the governor, and PDE have come up with a formula that defines what the variable costs are that they will consider and recognize as being something that should be subtracted from the contracts for pupil transportation. And if a school district decides to pay the contract as though the pandemic were not occurring. So the simple way to think of that is it assumes that the buses run every day, that you pay for that rate, but you subtract the defined variable costs. If the bus contractor gives you the appropriate certification, which is also part of your documents, and you approve that method, then that information eventually has to be transmitted to the Department of Education by September of next year. What that means is then you will be eligible to use the 2019-2020 data as though it were this year. And in 2021-2022, get the same amount of subsidy. If, on the other hand, you didn't do that, you did option 2, and you decided, well, you're not going to pay for days that buses don't run, as a just like plain example, then all those numbers get subtracted from you don't have those as actual expenditures. You can only submit the actual expenditures. You follow all the formulas And that results in a large decrease in your subsidy for a future year. So if you want to maintain a more even keel going forward, you would choose option 1. If you go to option 2, the theoretical dollars, well, I shouldn't say theoretical, but if you spend less money, you don't really save all that money because your subsidy will be cut by a large percentage of each dollar that you theoretically have saved. So instead of saving $1, I can't do the math perfectly in very simplistic terms. I was trying to ask Mr. Marnell this question earlier, but in effect, for proper transportation of students for the school day, not for extra events, your reimbursement rate, I believe, is about 91 cents on the dollar. Is that correct, Mr. Marnell? Is he still on with us?
Yes, that is very close.
Okay. So my simplistic way of looking at it, which may not be exactly this number, is that if you try to save $1 now and drastically cut your expenses, you will be penalized somewhere around 91 cents of each one of those dollars in the following year.
So can I clarify, when you say to pay as if the pandemic hadn't happened, that means maintaining the bus drivers' salaries? I mean, what exactly does that mean when you say pay as if the pandemic hadn't occurred?
Okay, we're going to go into the weeds now.
Sorry, I didn't realize I didn't mean to send you there.
Okay.
I think what he needs to explain, Candace, is that it's a formula. So what we deduct is any variable costs from that. So we're deducting salaries and fuel, if I'm correct. What we are paying for in the contract is his fixed. So like any loans he would have, but we would not be paying wages. And if we don't pay the wages and we don't pay the fuel costs to him, we're not held accountable for that with the state. So our subsidy would remain the same going forward. So every dollar we saved would truly be $1 saved, correct, Mr. Patonic? If we choose option 1, every dollar we save would truly be a savings versus option 2, where you would be saving, if it's $1.
Okay. Yes, if you look at it, the variable costs are not really huge numbers.
No, they're not.
But you get to keep those. That's true. That's another way to look at it. If you follow option 1, that deduction for the variable costs, which is certified by the contractor to you, you don't have to spend that and give it to him. It's deducted from what you owe him. And you don't get penalized for that by having your subsidy lessened by that amount of money. Okay, so that part, that's accurate. So in effect, to me, I don't know. I mean, Mr. Masha, Mr. Swink, Mr. Marnell, and I have all talked about this. I've discussed it with you. And to me, the obvious answer seems to be the safest, smartest course is option 1.
Just so everybody, if I'm reading this correctly, because he did have to submit his certification to us doing his formula. So for the month of November, we are projected to save by choosing option 1. His variable costs are $11,506.
That's one way to look at it, yes.
So that would be a savings to the district. And then going into December, that variable cost is $12,425.11. So those are actual savings. I feel like we would come out further ahead, going this route and saving some money versus going into next year and getting less of a subsidy when we're really going to need that money. That could be a huge gamble, and I think we're not going to come out on the plus.
Are you going to keep doing that every year?
Well, this is specifically because of the state legislature passing this statute for this year.
Just for 1 year?
So far.
Yes.
Don't know what happens if the pandemic continues next fall.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Botonic, when was it passed by the legislature? Recently?
A day or two before Thanksgiving break. But the state legislature passed the skeleton statute, which I believe I've given you in board docs. They left it to the Department of Ed to define, quote, variable costs, close quote. So that happened sometime in December. I don't know the exact date.
So I remember last year when we talked about this, the reimbursement, they sort of, held it over our heads to pay the bus contractor because so we could get the reimbursement this year. And, it's sort of happening again.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Going to happen again.
Yes.
And again and again.
I'm not sure, how I'm going to vote on this evening. I know we're not voting this evening, but I don't have a clear, recommendation or I don't think I'm going to do some more thinking about it, how I'm going to go about it.
Do I need to go through these slides with you, or is this adequate?
Oh, no, let's move on.
Thank you.
Mr. Polakowski, there are some slides attached under this. There was a Zoom meeting, correct, that this was all presented in, that I believe Mr. Potonic signed up and attended. You could read through.
And Mr. Marnell, we both did. He
You could
let me
read
in.
through those and see what they're talking about. Like, I think last year when a lot of districts did what they did with their busing, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what happened last year, but this is actually coming from the state versus last year, people were just doing what they wanted to do. Like, there wasn't anything that came down from the state that said anybody had to continue to pay or how to pay or when you were going to be held harmless or not. But this way they're giving us a way to save some money and not be held harmless. So that's the way I understood this.
No, it's to save money and be held harmless.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
You dropped the word not in there. I think it was an
Okay.
accident. But
Yeah, we would be held harmless if we choose option 1. If we choose option 2,
correct.
Then
We're on our own.
city. So, and I don't know, is there an ending date on this? Like that it's just for the year. Like there's no, because it's for the 2020-2021 school year is what the code, that act was, correct? Like there isn't a date to it. It's not ongoing. So if this were to be added again for next year, that's something that they would have to pass again.
Probably be a different formula.
Yes.
Okay, so for November and December, we're going to pay $224,252 for transportation for our kids. Is that right?
If you choose option 1, that's what would be owed because you didn't pay that yet.
No, but it says the amount that's due.
Correct.
I wasn't aware we had any transportation in November or December, but maybe I don't know what's going on.
You did not, and that's the whole point. You have
So
to
we're gonna
treat
pay
it as though
200
COVID had not occurred and the schools were not closed.
For $225,000 of our taxpayers' money, we're going to pay that. $225,000 for 2
If you
months of
choose option
transportation.
1 and if you want to protect the future subsidy.
We did have some transportation in November. I mean, I don't know if there was transportation before Thanksgiving. So there was
The days have to be, yes. accounted for. And that's why the months are, well, that would be one reason why the months are different.
So if we had $225,000 or whatever the amount was, we're being reimbursed 91 cents for each dollar that we're spending, correct? So we're being reimbursed over $200,000 for transportation.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that when
I don't think so either, Michelle. I don't think so either. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I'm agreeing with you.
It's a lose-lose situation. I think we're going to be paying for something that we didn't use, but if we open fully back up and everybody's going to school every day next week, hopefully, or next year, hopefully we will be further behind because we won't have all that subsidy. I mean, hopefully it's only a short period of time. Okay, does anybody else have anything on transportation? Okay, tax collector remuneration plan.
The board will be asked to set the compensation for tax collector fee for tax collectors who run as elected or serve for years starting in 2022, i.e. example 2021 primary and general election and cost reimbursement request. And there is a chart that was supplied. And if you look at that chart, I'm sorry. Okay, the current, the 2021, 2022 current term has been filled in, and then board will have to make a decision what would be the increases for the next 4 years.
Mhm. May I speak to this?
Yes.
Okay. I'm using figures that I have. I spent a long time on the phone today calling tax offices, and I tried to call our local tax office. You get a recording. Other places, there's no phone working and this and that, the other thing. So I'm using the figures that I have, and I've been through this before. And I know I did it one time after this, but I'm going to share with you what I have now. Mr. Botanic, before I go any farther, and I read these documents 50 times and I can't find it. Did you not say in there that they actually get a W-2 form? Is that right? The tax collector gets a W-2 form. They're considered an employee of the district. Is that right?
They get a W-2 form,
No.
but they're not our employee. They're, I believe the law considers them a common law employee.
Okay.
They're not
Okay.
part of the state retirement system, so
They're
don't-
not part of the state
Okay, that's
retirement
right.
system.
But we pay things like Social Security and that, right?
we have to by law.
Okay, these are the figures that I have. According to what we have going now, our tax collection bill for the year will be approximately $185,000. We pay salaries, Social Security, something called an OPT commission, a Berkheimer commission, a Westmoreland County transfer commission, bond premium, supplies, legal and audit services, and so forth. Okay, but this is the thing that I worked on today. Each tax collector gets this box from the courthouse. And in this box are all the tax bills. They're already printed up. And they get the envelopes, they get the postage, they get all that. And their job is to put them together and mail them out. So they do it by what's called units. How many bills do they actually send out? Now, I did as much research as I can. So these numbers are not totally accurate, but they're not totally inaccurate. In East Huntington, the salary there is $33,470. And per unit, that person is getting paid $7.77 for each bill that they mail out. That's pretty good. And this is consistent with what I did later. In Scottdale, the salary is $27,652. That person gets $13.22 per unit. Upper Tyrone has their salary is $16,529, and that's $13.38 each. Everson, the salary is $11,345, for which they get paid $28.94 per unit. Now, what I do want to point out to you, and I have the documents here, and this is a couple years old, but Fayette County pays $2.20 per unit, $2.20. I know I did the Everson one later and I can't find my papers at home, and I know it was like $32 a letter. I think when we're looking at 180 some $1,000s to collect these taxes, and everybody says, oh, don't cut education, but find ways to save money, you better think long and hard about what you're doing. This, in my opinion, is a travesty. A travesty that we are paying these kinds of rates. And I can remember saying at a meeting, and I never forgot this, I said at the time it was $32 a letter or something, and I'll never forget the school director looked across me right in the face and she said, I think that's fair. I'll never forget that as long as I live. That's one letter, $32 to mail it. I think you better take a long, hard look at what we are paying for tax collection. $180,000, folks, is not chump change. Update my figures. I want you to. They're even worse than the ones I gave you today.
So I don't know a lot about this. Is there another option? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you pay them. Fayette County's paying $2.20 per unit, Christy. We're paying $7, which is cheap. That's East Huntington. That's the big one. $13, $28 a unit compared to
Who is that set by?
us. Now, I will tell you this, Scottdale, apparently Scottdale collects its own, well, you know, there's spring taxes and fall taxes. And I know Scottdale, I have a thing here where they pay their tax collector 13, they did, I don't know right now, but the council said that the tax collector got a total sum or a salary of $13,000. So now I don't know Scottdale politics or councils or anything like that, but I do have that information. But again, update my numbers, and I'm telling you, this is what you're looking at, $180 some $1,000 to collect our taxes. And I've been through this before. You want to do it again? Go ahead. Everybody says cut costs, not education, cut costs, not education. There's no
But
education.
the problem is that $185,000 combines different taxes and different tax collectors. These tax collectors collect the local services tax of $5, and they collect the school district tax. Berkheimer is a completely different operation to collect the earned income tax. So
I'm talking about all taxes put together, David, all the taxes put together that we get money for.
Okay, but did you take approximately, I don't know how many units there are, but for 2020, I'm sorry, we're in
21, 22, 2021, 21, 22.
2021, you have 32,000, 27,000, 16, and 11. So 27, 54, 56, $86,000 roughly. Is that the plus the hundreds, whatever that comes to? So you're around $88,000. Is that what you divided the units into, or did you divide the units into the 185,000?
No, I divided the units into the salaries that were on that little chart. I just
The
read
individual salaries.
Yeah, that's in that box. I just said to you. Yeah.
Okay.
I took
All
each salary and divided the number of units. Now, remember, my information isn't brand spanking new, so somebody else should do this. But I'm telling you, I know that this is what we have been paying in the past. Now,
Okay, my point was that the
divided by the units.
185, my point was that the $185,000 is a total.
It's a
is not
total.
going to
It's a
these
total.
tax collectors. These tax collectors total is roughly $88,000.
About $90,000.
Okay.
About $90,000, right? But David,
Plus
when
postage.
you look at 300 and some units in Everson, you know what? Do what you want, people. I'm trying to share with you a place where you need to look when you have financial concerns. I'm trying to explain to you the difference. Fayette County, $2.20.
I want to understand this a little bit better, but are we paying per piece, or we're paying a percentage of the dollar amount that they collect?
Michelle, I can't tell, but this is their salary. This is their salary. Look
So
at
if
this.
this, are we giving them a paycheck where we are also paying payroll taxes on that paycheck? Or are they
Ask David. Ask David.
99?
Ask David. I'm not a tax collector. I'm going by salary, Michelle.
I don't know about the social security aspect of this. Mr. Marnell just commented on it. I hadn't looked into that. You are paying a commission for the $5 tax, 3%.
3 cents, yeah, per dollar.
For
And then
all
we're
of the
paying-
real estate taxes, what you have done in the past is pay a salary
Yeah.
or a fixed number. You can think of it as salary or fixed number. It's not
Here's
based
my
upon
question.
a percentage. Go ahead.
So Upper Tyrone for the 2021-2022 school year, we lost a large tax revenue. Was that deducted from that amount of money? Were they making more money than that before? Or is that what they should have made? Because if I'm reading this right, we're paying 3 cents on every dollar that they collect.
Well,
No, that's only for
that
the
one tax.
$5
No,
local
that's the
services
$5
tax.
thing. That's only the $5 thing,
It's a
Michelle.
separate tax.
It's separate.
Okay.
That's at $5 per capita or something like that, income or something like that. No, just at
It used
$5.
to be an occupational privilege.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
now part of the local services tax,
It has a
which
new
is
name.
collected by the local tax collector. Most of the money goes to the
Okay.
township or municipality. We're by law only permitted to collect $5.
So they're getting 3 cents on 3% of that plus this salary.
15 cents. Yes,
Yes.
correct.
Michelle, I just want someone to do the research. Like I've done it twice. I think I've done it 3 times. And it's fallen on deaf ears. And you know what? I really don't care anymore. I'm trying to help. And I'm trying to explain, because when you see these numbers, I don't think you realize what's involved. There's not a whole lot of work involved in this. In fact, if you want a tax receipt, you better put your own envelope with your own stamp in it if you want to even get a receipt. If you do it by mail, they won't even mail you a receipt. And they don't pay the expenses on these. It comes from the courthouse in boxes. They just tear them apart and off they go.
Are we able to reach out to the IU to see if there's any information at the IU on this, Mr. Masha, in regards to what other districts are paying?
I will do that. There was just an article in the paper Courier, yes, I think it was yesterday, concerning Connellsville's tax, and I have to pull that out. I will. Yes, I just made myself a note of that, Mrs. Williams.
Thank
Well,
you.
I think it's always an option for the school district to collect their own taxes, correct? But it becomes even more of a burden on the business office, right?
You know, Christy, I looked at that and I also read the law. We used to get the PSBA bulletin black and white, and believe me, I still have them. And what they said was, you can never set up a system. For example, suppose we said we're going to pay our tax collectors 10 cents. They said you can't establish some way low salary so that nobody will want to do it. They don't really address the fact that school districts themselves collect taxes. And to the best of my knowledge, nobody does. I don't think, I could be wrong. But it talks about you have to give them a fair amount of money. Well, to me, $32 a letter is more than fair. And I just resent that very much. But I looked at the law and it specifically says you can't just lowball it to the point where nobody will want to do it. But I remember nobody wanted to be the tax collector in Everson. And then I publicly spoke of that. And they had like 17 people wanting to be the tax collector in Everson that year. I remember that. And oh my God, we didn't know about this, you know. It's always been under the rug. Everybody's afraid to talk about this kind of thing. It's a taboo subject. Well, not with me. I'm done. Let's move on.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, accept retirement of transportation director.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this for the next meeting.
We're not voting tonight.
Oh, that's right.
Discussion.
Oh, then what do we do? How do we get this off the agenda? I'm sorry, I knew better than that. How do we get this off the agenda? Because it's something we have to talk about.
Well, can we let Mr. Masha read this and then?
Whatever. I'm sorry, Michelle, I shouldn't have said that. I just want it off the agenda so we can talk about it.
The board will be asked to accept the retirement of Charlie Swink as Transportation Director effective June 30th, 2021.
Well, Mr. Swink gave you the necessary advance notice, which entitles him to the payment of certain benefits, amounts of money under the Act 93 plan. And he had to give you that 6 months in advance.
Okay.
I don't think you're in a position to actually refuse it to him or deny it.
It was my understanding that accepting his resignation or his retirement isn't necessarily the issue. It's how we want to post the future position.
So on my agenda, it says effective June 30th, 21, and authorize administration to advertise and post the position. There's the problem.
Right. So what I'm saying is for next week, when we want to vote, couldn't we amend the vote to just be to accept his resignation?
To stop it after June 20th, 2021. Is that what we should do? Just stop it right there?
Yes, Mr. Masha, can we remove the authorized admin to advertise and post the position?
Yes.
The board has time to discuss.
Thank you. That works. That solves the problem.
We're going to end right after the date then, correct, Mrs. Williams?
Correct. Is there any other discussion? Okay, accept retirement of business manager, board treasurer.
The board will be asked to approve the retirement of James Marnell as business manager and board treasurer effective June 30th, 2021, and authorize administration to advertise the position.
I have a comment. I think the board needs to be involved in how, who, when, where, and what we do to advertise that position. That's a biggie. Advertising that position is a major decision as to how it should be done.
I think this is, in my opinion, this is something that needs to be discussed with the other position, the transportation director position that we just discussed, before we decide how we're going to proceed in advertising this position as well.
Michelle, can we stop this one right after June 30th, 2021? Can we stop that motion, that thing there? The board will be asked to stop it after June 30th, 2021. Obviously, we owe him the respect to honor his retirement request, but then we have time then to do the rest of that recommendation.
I think that we need to act quickly on this.
Yeah.
So if we're making any changes to the job description for this item, it needs to be made pretty quickly, but I think we can do that over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Messer, can you remove all of that as well?
After the date, yes.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, accept retirement of cafeteria worker.
The board will be asked to approve the retirement of Debbie McGeary, cafeteria worker, effective December 31st, 2020.
Have we advertised to replace this position, or is it something that we don't need to replace?
I think Vicky's here, but I don't think that this is a position that she might be looking to fill. But Vicky, if you're there, could you?
I think she has other people laid off, doesn't she?
And I would like to thank all these individuals for their service, and wish them the best in their retirement. Mrs. Capone, are you there?
Mr. Mesh, I thought she had some people that were not working right now. Wouldn't we just automatically be moving somebody back up or something like that?
I'm not even certain that this is an individual that's working right now, Dr. Fikes.
Okay. But I did think there were people that weren't working in the cafeteria.
Yes.
So
yeah, well, right now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, right now, we only have 3 ladies working at the middle school. listening to the plans, tentatively bringing back the elementary kids. I've already started working on some plans. You bring people back by seniority, not by necessarily what school they normally work at. So at this time, I will not be filling that position, because with hybrid, we've even reduced some people even when everybody's back in hybrid. So we won't be filling that position right now.
Thank you, Mrs. Capone. Any other comments? Resignation of Jenna Hickson from District Newsletter.
The board will be asked to accept the resignation of Jenna Hickson as sponsor for the So New Scotty newsletter effective immediately, and authorize administration to post the supplemental position. And I'd like to thank Mrs. Hickson for the wonderful job that she did in drafting the newsletter.
Are there any comments? FMLA elementary teacher.
The board will be asked to consider the approval of an FMLA with no break in service for approximately 12 weeks for Katie Marnell from January 29th, 2021 to approximately May 4th, 2021.
Any comments? Volunteer boys basketball coach.
The board will be asked at the recommendation of the head boys basketball coach, Frank Bucino, to approve Tommy Zatkowski as a volunteer for boys basketball.
Any discussion? Do we have any citizens' comments?
There was someone who called in and asked if they could do a citizen comment at the end. Mr. Pushkar, did anyone call you? I asked them to call you for the information.
Nobody called me.
All right, I asked who it was and they didn't respond back to me. So I guess it's no.
Anonymous. Hey, Jan, I want these flags next week. No, I want,
Okay, is there any other discussion from the board? I have a motion to adjourn.
I wanted to say,
Oh, I'm sorry, Heather.
sorry, I was hitting the wrong thing.
That's
I
okay.
just would like to talk about the reopening of the schools. And I would really hope that we would put a plan in place to bring all the kids back, at least AB for next week. Well, for the next meeting. Yeah, I feel like all the kids are struggling. They all need to be back. The parents all want it. Like, I think we should look forward to that. Like, put a plan in place for that. I think a lot of board members, I'm hoping a lot of board members feel the same way.
Well, they don't.
What if we went with like a staggered plan? Like we went with the 25th, we bring back K through 5. Then the next week we bring back the middle school. The next week we bring back the high school.
No.
I think that we have to, and not 2 weeks, not 3 weeks, like 1 week. We get these kids back. They're failing, they're not showing up in their classrooms. They're lost. They're far behind. We got to do something. They need to be in school, and they need to be in school because when they're in school, they're wearing their masks. They're staying 6 feet apart. They're not hanging out, with a group of people not wearing masks, and I think that they need to be back.
I agree, 100%.
We'll see.
So, Mr. Masha, we kind of worked through this once, and I didn't come prepared to talk about it tonight, but in order to do the attestation in substantial and remain eligible for athletics and extracurricular events, isn't the attestation that you are following the guidelines.
You have to follow this.
So if you don't follow the guidelines, then you're no longer eligible to do the athletics
That would be correct.
or extracurriculars.
How can that be when they're doing sports now without school? They're doing sports now without school.
How are the other districts? All the other districts are in school and doing athletics.
Athletics, they
I
are.
don't understand that at
I
all.
don't know, call the governor or the attorney general or somebody and
Well, how
ask
is
them why
every
they're not
other
enforcing
district
it.
So
I'm just
So
telling
I
you
think-
that's what it says.
I think there's some confusion as to what we're saying the attestation form says.
She wants them out.
Options on the attestation form. One option is that you do not go back to school until you are 2 weeks in the moderate.
Yes.
Sign the attestation form and you are able to participate in sports and extracurriculars. Option 2 on the attestation form says that you are going to remain in school. You are going to follow all of the guidelines.
Follow all the guidelines, yes.
You're going to follow the masking, the 6 feet, and you're also going to, when you have cases, you're going to shut down according to the guidelines.
Yes.
Maybe more closures, may not be more closures. The option and you can continue sports under that option. Option 3 is to do nothing with the attestation form. If you do nothing with the attestation form, you cannot have sports, you cannot have extracurriculars. Those are automatically shut down. So the only way sports and extracurriculars are shut down is if the board votes to shut them down or you don't sign the attestation form and then the state shuts you down. So there are 2 options on an attestation form. One is to remain virtual until 2 weeks in moderate. The other option is to say that you are going to follow all of the guidelines and then you can go back to school.
That is correct.
Your extracurriculars.
That's what it says. That's what it
Yes,
says.
that's exactly what it says. So it
That
does
word
not
or,
say,
that word or jumped out at me, Michelle, but we never considered that. We never considered the or, because our kids could have been in school all this time. It's
well,
just-
I think that the governor stepped in and said schools should close, which went above and beyond the attestation form at that point. And basically what we were trying to do at the time when we discussed these closures was to give us that 2 weeks of time after the holiday break. That's what we were trying to do at that point, was to give us 2 weeks to see where we're at. So as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I feel wholeheartedly that if we are going to, if anybody on this board or Mr. Masha is going to make a recommendation to go back to school K through 5, we should also have the plan in place that says what we are going to do to move forward. Because every email that I receive, I shouldn't say every email, but the majority of the emails that I'm receiving are not K through 5. So my problem with solely focusing on bringing back K through 5 is that that's not the area where I feel educationally our kids are struggling the most. You know, do I feel bad for the kindergartner that can't get online and that's a struggle and socially they're having issues? Sure, I do. However, the children that are failing in this district are mostly coming 6 through 12. So to sit here and say, let's make a plan, let's bring back K through 5 and not address the other issues that are happening, we are failing this district. So yes, I believe that when we set up K through 5 comes back next week, then I think that we set up a stagger. And in all honesty, Mrs. Love, I don't believe that there should be what's the point in what's honestly the point to bringing back 6 through 8 for a week and then moving on 9 to 12? What honest difference does that make when they're in 2 separate buildings, they're riding 2 different because they're not doing, do you know what I mean? Like it's not intermingling in any way, shape, or form. So in my mind, you pick a time frame, you say that if we're successful K through 5, because K through 5 is to be the least effective group of children, as far as, contracting COVID and being very sick from it. So you bring them back a certain amount of time and you say that, okay, we're successful, we move on. But I think you don't move on 6 to 8 and 9 to 12, 2 weeks.
At the same time, huh?
Bring them all back at the same time.
Michelle, I want to speak to that attestation. What makes you think that that thing's not going to go on and on and on and on and on, and they're going to pump up those numbers to make sure that we never get back? We're never going to reach their goals, their standards. They'll move the goalposts. They'll move the goalposts and come up with something else. We have to take this thing. We have to do it, us.
Well, they've allowed, that's where we're at right now, because the governor has come out and said, you can return K through 5 in substantial. So now there is no metric, there's no measurement. We have to, as a board of non-epidemiologists, decide when it's safe to send our children. But my opinion is that we should not be discussing K through 5, because I think our biggest struggle is not children K through 5. Those are not the children that are failing. Those are the children that are struggling socially and mentally, maybe, but they're not our kids that are failing, and they're not the kids that are moving on to the next step in their life.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
So let's next week vote on everybody coming back.
Everybody is.
I think there needs to be a staggered plan.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Everybody comes back. Everybody
There
comes
should be
back.
a staggered plan. And
No staggered plan. No staggered plan.
Just everybody
No
back.
staggered plan.
I will present.
Well, I'm going to wait and see what Mr. Masha's recommendation is on that, but I think that I don't want to leave a meeting next week and say that we're going to wait till February to vote on when the other kids are coming back. I think there should be a solid plan, K through 5 this day, 6 through 12 this day. Plan.
There will.
I think it's up to the board. It's up to the board. It's up to the board, no individual. We should
Oh,
have.
I agree.
We vote on whatever motions come up. If it's a staggered one, you vote it down until we get to the point where every child is treated equally and gets back to school.
I agree, Catherine.
Heather, I've been pushing this for 3 months, 4
Me too.
months. Yeah, you have. Yeah. No, I won't do that.
Are there any other comments?
Yeah, thank you. This was not a real long meeting tonight, Mel.
It wasn't?
No, this isn't bad. It's only 10 o'clock. I can still go home and have my wine.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Hey, everybody.